Want to just start with a little bit of housekeeping.
Yep.
Obviously, injuries are a bit of an issue at the moment. Anything looking like it's close, or for this match in particular?
No, we'll be as we were at the weekend in terms of the squad. So yeah, I mean we've looked very closely at the players over the last couple of days, and at least we have one extra day from the weekend to recover, which is good in that sense. But of course, then we've got a quick turnaround before we then go to Cardiff.
If not for this match, is Cardiff going to be too soon for anybody, or are there sort of ones that are on the horizon for that?
Well, probably be a bit more optimistic maybe about Naki. I wouldn't really. No, the others aren't going to be in the frame. Although Zach's warmed up with his teammates today. Rob Atkinson's been training with us quite regularly recently, and looks good. So hopefully, in the next few weeks, we'll probably get him some time in one of the under 21 games, which would be really good for him. So there is progress in that regard. Ross McCraw is making positive progress, but again, I don't think there's anything really to get overly excited about, in the sense that, I mean, I'm really pleased that he looks totally different. He's moving well. He's obviously a lot more positive now that his problem's been dealt with, and I think that what that indicates for us is that obviously he's moving in the right direction, but it's still early days, and I don't see any reason to change what we already talked about. That was, I think, January, February, something like that. So,
because I think you were right at the weekend to point out you've got a couple of your defenders when you change the system playing out of position and playing really well, but I guess over a sustained period of time, the more you ask players to do that, it becomes more difficult for them to sustain.
Well, I mean, the simple answer is yes. Of course, we would prefer to have players in their rightful positions. I think what is positive for us is that we have players who are both versatile and players who, I think I said at the weekend, we've got players who are prepared to do what the team needs rather than really what they would like to do. But the key to it is that players who play out of position are probably getting into the side when actually sometimes they wouldn't do it. It's always up to the players, I think, really to take their opportunities, and what we have to do, and I think what we did very well at the weekend was collectively put in a really spirited performance and quite a dogged performance. It wasn't one of outstanding quality if you look at the flow of football, but what we had was we had some outstanding defending going on, and not just from the defenders, from everyone within the side. So we're going to need that in every game that we play, really, but with a quick turnaround and us being pretty limited in terms of our availability and I suppose options in some ways. But I'm not one for really spouting on about excuses in that regard. It's we've got plenty of positive options. How we set up going forward. What we don't have is depth of players who are really set out to be defenders. So it means that those players who we're currently calling upon have to really get their heads around being the players that we're going to rely on, and that is, I would hope that that's what all players want anyway.
Yeah. And I was going to pick up on the defending, because particularly at the weekend, but I think across the season you can see not a massive shift, but a movement further towards that sort of collective mindset of, we are going to be bloody minded, we are going to make that extra run to put them under pressure and just do everything we can to keep those clean sheets as much as possible.
Yeah, maybe they reflect the manager's personality then, being bloody minded, eh? Look, it's to be successful. You have to you have to maximise what you have, and what we always try to do, all of us here, is put together a side which represents what we are, and that is a team which cares about how we play and cares about the results. We want to be successful, and so the season's long and hard, and when you suffer either injuries or players being missing for whatever reason, it really does intensify the demands on individuals within the squad. But even players who are currently unavailable and through either injury or whatever they can still have a positive impact around how we work during the week, and that's the most important thing. I think we've tried to put together a squad which plays football which is positive and at a good intensity. But on top of that, of course, it's to have a winning mentality means that you've got to mix it with all the sides. And so we're going to come up against a side on Wednesday in Ipswich who are having a fabulous, start to the season. Have carried their momentum on really very, very impressively from promotion last season. And what we have to do is make sure that we give them a really stern test. I suppose it's a really good example of the momentum sort of theory, which has happened, I think, quite historically with sides who come up from League One. There are a number of sides who have had back-to-back promotions, and when you sort of dissect what the individuals are within the squad, people could be relatively critical. But what is very apparent is that they have a group ethic and the qualities to maintain what's been a very, very impressive run. But they're still coming to our place, and I think they'll expect us to be a really tough opponent.
I'm sure they will. And talking of you being bloody minded, has anything come of your frustrations that you relieved a little bit at the weekend?
I've had conversations internally here, yeah, and look, I think the most important thing is that we concentrate very much on the football side of it. That my job will always remain the same, and that is to support my staff and our players, and that we do everything we can to continue to look forward with a bit of optimism in terms of what we can achieve on the pitch. That's the biggest thing. Yeah, I mean, I'm well aware of what I am, and sometimes how I frame things can be an irritant for other people, but I say what I think. Okay, cheers.
Those conversations ended on a positive note then, would that be fair?
I've had a chat with Tom this week, who I think will be really good for the football club in terms of his role as the COO. He's liked, but most importantly, he's very well respected within the training ground in terms of his integrity and what he brings. So early days for him, baptism of fire maybe, but he'll be fine, and I think he's a really good appointment for the club. So I spoke to him, I spoke to Gavin as well. Look, whatever happens behind the scenes is it's not about being particularly aggressive about it. It's about being a voice in opinions, and for every one opinion there's a counter opinion. So I think it's just something that we'll try to resolve.
Linking actually from that, not intentionally, with Tom, obviously this game against Ipswich, Mark Ashton comes back to Ashton Gate. He was. I
thought what I did at the weekend was to sort of take away from that.
But in terms of he as a figure at this club, he was quite a prominent figure. You worked with him.
Yeah, I did.
Towards. I think supporters would. How did you get on with Mark? What was
I
your
I got on fine with Mark. You know, but look again, how things. I don't really think we should be making the focus of this about Mark. Really, he was employed here for a number of years, and he was here at the start of my tenure as manager, and has moved on to Ipswich, and they're obviously doing pretty well at the moment. But outside of that, I don't think really it's relevant to be going overboard with that, if you don't mind me sort of saying that. But I want to try and concentrate now on the game and the build up to the game in terms of us in a footballing sense. I fully understand that there'll be a lot of interest out there, and there will be talk about the different styles of doing the job. The relevant point in terms of where we are now is we have decided to, and out of necessity, gone down a tighter financial route because we needed to. So I think then the arguments of where you take that argument is, I think that's your domain now, really, to argue why we're in that position or not, because that will be, look, I understand where you're coming from, and that will be the relevance of the conversation. And so, yeah, I have my views on it. Of course I do. You know, I've never really wanted to work in a way where we throw everything at it in the short term to try and get success, because I personally don't agree with that as a sustainable model. But there are instances that people get success with it, and there you go. It's where you sit on the argument, really.
Because there would be supporters who say you've kind of had to, and I'm not saying this is just on Mark because it's unfair just to pin it on one person, that you've kind of picked up the pieces from that as kind of the very sort of broad narrative around it. Yeah,
but I'm pretty well versed at doing that. I mean, I've worked at clubs where, believe it or not, when my employers and the owners I've spoken to have wanted me to spend more money, and I've said no. You know, when you've got money doesn't mean you have to spend it, you know. What you have to do, and this is why I look at it from a football perspective all the time. I look at what we've got and what we need, and why bring more players in who are no better than what you got. So my view on it is slightly different anyway. So it doesn't matter whether there's a shed load of money or not. And that's not to say that, I mean, in an ideal world at the moment, we could do with having 2 or 3 more players. But there is always a fine balance between what the right number of players is. And yeah, I mean, time will tell whether we can negotiate this rather lean spell that we've got in terms of the squad that we have available. It always makes it more manageable when you get decent results. But as people always want to tell you what the run is, and they'll either extend the run that you've got to make it look as though you've had 2 wins out of whatever, or if you extend it by about 3 more games, then you might see that you've actually won about half your game. So it depends how people want to look at it. The bottom line for us is that with the group that we have, I think we're making progress still. I think we would accelerate that had we have avoided injuries. But look, most of ours have been game related. You know, we don't have the number of unnecessary injuries that we used to have. Unnecessary because of the training, the long-term training program, and the inability of players to play at a, you know, we just had too many. We had too many players at one point, far too many players, and the training program wasn't appropriate for athletes to be robust enough to play the way that we play now.
That's interesting. So in the sense that they weren't training at the right level, so therefore that made them more susceptible to injuries.
Yeah, you can be overtrained, you can be undertrained. So players who don't train enough are probably the ones where you think about something like Andy King, who was the topic of conversation at the weekend. Andy, when his first year here, I mean, I've known him for years, and he's never been a player to suffer with injuries. He had 2 injuries, two hamstring injuries in that first year. But that comes off the back of 2 years of not playing regular football, and being farmed out on loan and not training enough, or, as it was when he went to Belgium, overtraining. You know, they're out in the field for 2-3 hours at a time. You know, ridiculous training regimes, because you can't have one session covers all. It doesn't work like that. That's why, you know, when you have more players, you better have more staff. Let's face it, we couldn't cram any more people in this place. You know, we've got the men's operation, the women's operation, and the academy. You know, and then if you expand the number of players on top of that, then I mean, we had a lone physio when I first arrived here. What's one of them?
What was that?
Well, what's one of them? What's a loan physio? So he treated all the lads who were out on loan who came back injured.
Right.
What's all that about? Bizarre, never heard of that before. Anyway, by the way, great lad, and he's at Plymouth now doing a great job. So, but all I'm saying is, what more players does is what people, you know, one of my former clubs, we have far too many players, and so on a match day, we ended up having a huge cohort of staff who had to stay behind on match days to train a group of players. It was massive, and those players were totally demotivated because they were nowhere near the side. Now, what we've become at the minute is a very, very tight. We're right at the other end. We're probably a bit too tight in some ways, but at least it has we have an opportunity to be more efficient, and we aren't picking up injuries which are through lack of planning. That's the big thing.
Coming back to the team, the squad as it is, I just wonder how Hayden's kind of reacted to kind of what happened on Saturday.
Well,
you were very sort of understanding of the situation at the time, but yeah.
Hey, look, I don't like doing that. You know, there are times when you are saying games, and I remember my first game in the dugout. We played Swansea away, and Riley Towler was having a bit of a difficult afternoon, but did we get to half time on that occasion? I think we got to half time and did that. I can't really remember. But what you have to think about is there are 2 main things, and the most important one is the team. And so it would be, I think, unwise and a big chance to go, well, rather than upset a player, let's wait till half time. We actually scored our goal on the cusp of half time, and so it's one of those where you sometimes it's a bit of luck, sometimes it's just being decisive about making a decision. And as it turns out, the game ended up 1-0, and that key moment in the sense of the goal was, sometimes it works for you, sometimes it doesn't. But of course, then there is always the the individual's well-being that you've got to think about, and so yeah, it's I think it can be a bit dispiriting for individuals, especially when they're young, and I suppose his cup debut versus his league full debut have been very, very marked differences. So, but he'll be fine, and he will recognise the areas that he needs to improve, and it's not personal. It's just what the team needs, and we needed to change the shape. But the risks of it, of course, were going back to what Ed spoke about earlier, and that is having, two players in the back line who aren't really specifically defenders, but they did okay. They did well.
On that, Mark Sykes, because we've seen Andy play centre back plenty of times before. Mark Sykes at right back, he actually played really well. For what he's in, an auxiliary position. Is that something that can be done more regularly? Like, is he almost a victim of his success there to a point? Because I know he prefers playing further forward, but
we do as well, because when he moved last season into the sort of wide striker role, or he's more of a winger than a wide striker. Depends who we play there. Belly's a wide striker. He's more of a winger, but I think he scored 5 goals from having played in various positions. I think Sykesy could also be a really good number 10 for us as well, and he's played that at Oxford. So, we're aware of where he's played in the past, and albeit at a league below, but I mean, he's developed hugely as an athlete as well as a footballer. So, needs must at the moment. I think that's the big thing for us. And all right, we've tried Tails at right back, but of course with Joe being injured, it's different ways of looking at the same problem. Really, it's who can fill one space, and where do we need a different type of player to allow us to play somebody like 90 where he does. So, there are lots of sort of spinning plates that we need to try and keep in the air.
And Jason Knight, is he back to approaching 100% now? Is he sort of shaking it off? Yeah, I mean, he didn't look like he was ill on Saturday.
Yeah.
Not saying he wasn't ill, but the way he played.
No, I mean, I think if you had spoken to him, I think he recognised that starting the game probably wouldn't be a good thing for him. Sometimes coming off the bench can just release any sort of, not that he's a player that gets stressed out, I don't think. He just loves playing. But I think he knew that going on at that time, so what did he play, around 50 minutes or so, something like that. Had he have started, I think we'd have been looking to replace him on 45, anything between 45 and 60. So, but I think it was a sensible thing not to put him under pressure to play, and it worked out for us on the day. But it only worked out for us on the day because the team were good. The team were good. The collective characteristics of us at the weekend allowed us to win the game.
Thanks very much.
Okay.